I remember seeing an article, someone that worked in a hotel in Miami Beach lived maybe in Miramar. So let's try to imagine what
An
their
hour and a half
travel time
commute,
is
yeah, at least.
there and back.
Forget Miramar. I live in Coral Gables. My wife works on Miami Beach. She spends 2.5 hours a day going to and from work. I mean, just going back to what you said about the quality of life. Hi, and welcome back to the Miami Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Omar, Communications Executive here at Cervera Real Estate. Today's episode is going to take a clear and honest look at the current state of mass transit in Miami. We're focusing on what's working, what's not, and where the city is realistically headed. Joining us for that conversation is Alice Bravo, president and founder of Alice Bravo and Associates. Her consulting firm focuses on engineering, transit planning, and infrastructure funding policy strategy. She has over 25 years of leadership experience across major public and private sector organizations with deep expertise in transportation systems, regulatory frameworks, and capital project delivery. So, Alice, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, this is a conversation we've been trying to have for quite a while, so I'm looking forward to finally diving in, right? Mass transit and the transit system in Miami is no surprise to anybody that there's room to be desired, right?
Correct.
So we're going to talk about sort of how we got here, where it is, and I know there's, exciting things to be optimistic about. So we're grateful for that. But before we dive in, I would love to let our listeners know a little bit more about you and your journey and sort of what brought you here today.
I'm born and raised in Miami, and I've lived here my whole life. I studied civil engineering at the University of Miami. I have an MBA from FIU, and I started off as a transportation design engineer, designing bridges, highways, transit projects. And over the years, I left the private sector and went to the Florida Department of Transportation. And I went at a great time where there was a lot of funding for projects in South Florida. So I got to be in charge of the Port of Miami Tunnel project, the 95 express lanes, reconstruction of the Palmetto, et cetera. And those were great opportunities to deliver big infrastructure projects that were very needed. And then through a twist of fate, I went to the city of Miami where I was the deputy city manager. And I got to oversee the building department, planning and zoning, capital improvements, public works, et cetera. I feel very fortunate for that experience. I got to see how a city is built, the relationship with the development community. I learned a lot there. And from there, I went to Miami-Dade County, where I was the director of the Transit and Public Works Department that got joined into one, DTPW. And so there, I helped create something called the SMART Plan, Strategic Miami Area Rapid Transit Plan. And the idea was to create 6 lines that would shoot off from the existing metro rail. I also thought while we try to deliver those projects, they're going to take a while. How about we get some development and some density around our existing metro rail and metro mover stations? So a lot of the relationships I made when I was at the city of Miami, I called those folks up. We issued requests for proposals, and we were very fortunate that Miami was at the right time to start building density around the metro rail system. So since then, I left government. I worked for a very large engineering firm, and 3 years ago, I started my own business. So I'm not only still working on transportation projects, but also helping developers work with either FDOT or municipalities for the county.
Amazing. So I think very well qualified to have this conversation based on what you just told us. So let's jump in, Alice. When we talk about the state of mass transit in Miami today, so what's actually working and where are we still falling short?
Well, I think we were very blessed in the very late 1970s when we were given the funding for the Metro Rail and the Metro Mover. At the time, the federal government provided 80% of the funding for those projects. Nowadays, a city's lucky if they get 50% of the funding from the federal government. Of course, the big ticket is the ongoing operations and maintenance of those systems. Once those systems were in place, maybe we didn't have any density, we didn't have desire for people to live around those stations yet. You could still live in a suburban lifestyle with a single family home and drive and maybe get to downtown in a reasonable amount of time. So I think cities grow in increments, and as that pain threshold grows of that travel time and the cost of owning a vehicle, and it gets worse and worse and worse, then at some point people pivot and say, wow, maybe having an apartment or a condominium near a metro rail station, and maybe I don't need to drive to work, and I'll get a lot of time and quality of life back. People make that decision. So I
Sure.
think cities grow in increments, and we got the metro rail at a great time because you're supposed to plan ahead for these projects. You
Right.
ideally build them before the density and the developments come in. So once they do, you have them in place. So if you look at the history of transportation and development, it is driven by the private sector. The original subway in New York City was a private venture
Oh, wow.
that was not profitable, so it was taken over by government. So I think over the last 40 years, since the metro rail opened, there's been a lot of plans, and those plans have been along the same corridors. And this process of pursuing federal funding is long and circuitous, and you have to do studies, and those studies are huge investments, millions of dollars, and they take several years. Sometimes if you get through that process and you pivot and you said, no, let's do something new or something different, now you have to start that process over, and a lot of variables change, the costs increase. So I think we have a pattern of stopping and starting and pivoting and changing direction over the last 40 years, and that's why it's been difficult to implement new corridors to build upon the metro rail we already have.
40 years, we have I guess, the one line of the metro, right?
Well, it's had two little extensions. There was
Okay.
one extension to the airport, to the Miami Intermodal Center. Prior to that, there was one small extension to the Palmetto Expressway. And then the other major thing that was built is the South Dade Busway.
Mhm.
And last year, that was converted to a bus rapid transit system,
Right.
something that looks and feels and operates every way possible like a train, except that it's an electric bus. So you don't have noise, you don't have vibration, and you can replace vehicles easily.
And so that launched, I believe it was like 6 months ago, more or less?
October.
Okay, and how's that going so far?
Well, I think they're still in the process of refining it, and there's issues with the traffic signalization and the cross streets. So these projects usually take 6 or 9 months before all the kinks are worked out. So they're in process of doing that. But you have these amazing stations
Right.
and there's definitely a development interest to live around them. And definitely people in South Dade are looking for a way to get to work more quickly, and so that bus route on the busway was already one of the most highly utilized in the county.
So and definitely we're seeing a lot of migration and people sort of buying further and further south as the city, closer to the central core, the prices go up understandably. So that's great that launched. What exactly is that route, the South Dade corridor, from where to where?
So it's parallel to US 1
Mhm.
between Dadeland, and it runs all the way to Homestead, Florida City.
Wow.
And so it's parallel lanes, parallel to US 1, dedicated only for the bus rapid transit vehicles. And so you have, I believe, 14 stations along the way. There are gate arms at the intersections. So these buses have something called signal preemption.
Mhm.
And basically, they're supposed to trigger the signal when they're coming so that they always have a green light.
Wow.
And that way it's a 20-mile corridor. You could travel through there much more quickly than if you were in a car
Sure.
going through the traffic signals and the delays you have in the morning.
So that would take you through to Dadeland, and I guess there you convert to Dadeland Station and take the Metro Rail.
Correct.
When we spoke last year, I remember you mentioned it's designed to kind of feel like the train, right? And it's air conditioned, which is great here in South Florida.
Right. So the stations, the first thing or the difference you'll notice between a train and a normal bus is that a train, you get to the station, you pay, and you wait on a platform. And then when the train arrives, everyone boards quickly. Normally on a bus, you see people standing in line and one by one tapping their fare card. So these stations are designed to have that payment when you enter the station.
Mhm.
So the vehicles, when they pull up, these are special buses that don't have steps.
Okay.
So when the bus pulls up, everyone's on the platform, the doors open, and everyone can quickly board. And that waiting area, there's an actual air conditioned vestibule there where you can wait in comfort. The metro stations are elevated, so you get a little more breeze, and
Sure.
these have air conditioning. So that process of level boarding, prepaying the fare, that's what it lets it operate like a
Like a
train.
train. I love that. And
But trains have a lot of vibration and noise, and these are electric buses, so you don't even hear them go by.
right, and I assume good for the environment as well. So you're working out kinks, but how is the adoption? Are people using it?
People are using it, and people are actually arriving earlier than they used to get on and take advantage of the time savings.
Yeah, great. Are you arriving sooner, you mean to
Like
work?
I think they had to start the service earlier, like maybe 4 in the morning instead of
Wow.
5 in the morning,
Okay.
because there's so many people traveling, and they wanna make sure they get on board.
Good. Well, I mean, the adoption is key because you can always work out the kinks, but if people aren't using it, then, that's a bigger problem. So I'm glad to hear that. So let's talk about the master plans for the future of mass transit. You talked earlier about smart plan you helped design. I saw it. It looks super cool. I was like, who knew there's actually a plan in place to cover all of Miami-Dade County with the metro rail, like this sitting there collecting dust. So part of it, I mean, makes someone, understandably a little bit angry that it hasn't been finished, but tell us, like, what is holding it up? Is it lobbying? Is it bureaucracy? Like, who do we call? Who's
Well,
to blame?
I think, if you look at those corridors in
Mhm.
that smart plan, those corridors were studied, since the early 1980s. They're over and over, and they've done the studies that you need to comply with in order to pursue federal funding. There's a NEPA law, National Environmental Policy Act.
Mhm.
So you'll hear about a study, a public hearing. People will go provide their feedback. Alternatives are developed, and the culmination of that is being eligible for federal funding. So these corridors have been studied several times each. I think anyone that drives is a traffic expert and
Mhm.
and tells you everything you need to know about traffic engineering, because we have limited transit, we have a limited number of transit users. So you don't have a lot of people saying we need transit. And what
Right.
I've noticed is that people that have never used transit love to say certain things that are not true. They'll say, "Oh, it's too late to build transit in Miami or in Florida. No one's ever going to use it." But those people have never ridden it.
Right.
Those people aren't seeing the units selling at the metro rail stations. Like, there are no
Like
waiting
hotcakes.
lists.
Yeah.
Like, the minute the units are available, they're taken up because the people, there's so much demand
Yeah.
to if you look at someone, we talk about affordable housing.
Mhm.
If you can live near where you work
Mhm.
and not need a car, that reduces your costs.
Sure.
Suddenly housing is more affordable if you don't need to pay for a car. And by the same token, if you could be live 20 miles away from your work but get to where you work quickly and reliably without the congestion factor,
Mhm.
then suddenly more affordable housing is available, right? Because if you live 3 hours away, you can't really count that as affordable housing.
Sure.
So, I think that voice of people that have lived in other cities and understand that, cities aren't just born overnight. These elements of successful cities are planned and implemented in phases, and that's why people use them, because the network gets better and better and better. That opinion has to be related to policymakers at all level, state, federal, local, to know that message that we really need more of this if we're going to keep growing and we're going to have quality of life here. We need to take these lessons from other places. If you look at Washington D.C., they started in a similar way to us. They had one line,
Mhm.
then they kind of made like a cross. They made another line, and if you do like a time lapse map, they added another line here, a short line here, then they added two stations, then they extended that line, and just over 40 or 50 years, they've filled in and created quite a network, quite a grid.
Right.
So you can't say let's not do anything because we don't have a grid. If you don't start doing it,
Right.
you'll never get to the grid. And look all around us. We're seeing 3 or 4-story buildings being replaced by 60-story buildings.
Mhm.
We can't have everyone moving around in a car. That
Right.
we know that's not a good result.
Yeah, well, the traffic is bad enough as it is, and the drivers here. So, adding to that chaos, but I've used the metro. I've used the Metro Mover here in Brickell. I love it. Like, I think it's one of the best ways to get around the area, and, it's super as more people relocate here too, as you're saying, from other cities, like other leading global cities, we have people coming from the Northeast, from Chicago, from all over. I think they're also kind of wondering, "Hey, where is the mass transit?" So I think more and more people will sort of advocate for that need.
Yes.
But that so going back to the plan, right? Like, what's it gonna take realistically? Because and is the plan that you designed the one that I saw with all the spokes? Okay, so we gotta show that on the screen, John. So we gotta show. I think what people need to call their commissioners and say, "I want Alice's plan to get approved." Like, what is the action, the call to action?
I think the call to action actually involves the legislature as well.
Mhm.
So these projects usually there's an assumed funding formula. You assume that the project will meet certain criteria and be eligible for 50% federal funding, and that we will provide 25% of the funding, and that the state will match that local 25%. And then, of course, Dade County, we have to plan for the operating and maintenance costs for the lifetime of the project and future upgrades and future vehicle replacements. So this all gets put into a funding pro forma.
Mhm.
So I think one of the issues to know is that we actually pay a dedicated sales tax here for these transit projects. So in 2002, the voters of Dade County approved a half-cent sales tax
Okay.
that is dedicated for the implementation of
In
these, yeah,
2002.
rapid transit projects.
But
Yes.
and since then, what has actually sort of come online? I guess the South Dade bus line?
Yes, yes. That surtax
Uh-huh.
created came with a list of eligible uses,
Okay.
and there were certain roads that needed to be widened as well.
Okay.
Some of the eligible uses were traffic circles. Some of the eligible uses were new buses. You have to keep your bus fleet current. So I think the funds got used for a lot of these eligible uses that are easier and faster to implement.
Sure.
And in 2015, 2016, people were asking the question, like, but what about the big ticket items,
Mhm.
these corridor extensions, which is what everybody was thinking about when they voted for that half penny. So I think what's happened at that time of the adoption of the SMART plan, we launched the studies, we had community support,
Mhm.
we had, whether it was the municipal, city elected officials and the county elected officials had all kind of become familiar with the process. And then, in a way, time is the enemy of these projects. Procurements were initiated, and then COVID hit.
Mm.
Then the prices of everything escalated, and some of these studies and procurements were put on hold. And then people started like, well, can we assess something, come up with something less expensive? And then you have a turnover at the elected official level. Now new people move in the neighborhood, and the traffic patterns change. So now everything you've studied and you probably spent millions of dollars studying, now these conditions have changed and you almost have to start from scratch. So I think the most important thing is to get the concepts aligned,
Okay.
get through these studies, figure out what today's cost of the projects are, and I'm sure the answer will be that the half penny and the available funding is not enough, and that there'll need to be some new funding source. So, I think it's easier to ask people to commit that new funding when you have the project teed up and ready to go and you've gone through the process.
Right.
So, I think that's what we've learned from the past. Don't stop studying the corridors just because right now it doesn't look like you have enough funding. Get through that process, know what it costs, and then get the funding approved. And that's actually what happened in 2002. The North Corridor had been studied. The
Mhm.
North Corridor connects to the Metro Rail at the Martin Luther King Station and
Sure.
runs north up 27th Avenue all the way to the Hard Rock Stadium.
Mm.
An environmental impact statement study had been finished for that corridor. The other corridor that was studied was the east-west corridor, so running parallel along 836 out west past FIU. That also had an environmental impact study approved. And that motivation that those studies were ready
Mhm.
is what led to the approval of the half penny in 2002.
So wait, you say you can take the metro rail all the way up to Hard Rock Stadium?
No. So that there was a study
Oh,
for
there was a
that.
plan for that.
Yes.
And what happened?
All right.
I almost got excited for a second.
All right. Let's talk about what the smart plan is
Okay. Yeah,
for
good
for
idea.
for a second. So we've talked about the smart plan, and the smart plan talked about corridors that again have been evaluated in different ways over the years. So the one that's been talked about the longest is the North Corridor.
Okay.
So the North Corridor would connect to the existing Metro Rail around the Martin Luther King Station and run north up
Mhm.
27th Avenue all the way to the Hard Rock Stadium near the county line.
Yeah, I love that.
So, um, the original Metro Rail in the 1970s was originally going to go on that alignment, and the alignment was modified to go west through Hialeah and to the Palmetto Expressway. So basically, that corridor was promised to be next,
Okay.
and that promise was made early 1980s. So other corridors that have been talked about a long time is putting commuter rail on the FEC tracks where the Brightline train runs. So we see the Brightline station, the Miami Central station, the Aventura station. There would be 4 or 5 new stations in between, and that commuter train would stop at all those stations in between and Miami Central and Brightline. So let's say you came down from Fort Lauderdale, you could
Mhm.
transfer at Aventura to the commuter rail and then maybe stop in North Miami.
Sure.
And so that would give you the short stops while Brightline gives you the longer regional stops.
Right.
Another corridor that's been talked about for decades is a beach corridor connecting downtown and Miami Beach.
Yeah, I love that.
Yes. Then we have the South Corridor that actually got implemented as
Okay.
bus rapid transit, and that runs parallel to US 1 between Dadeland and all the way down to Homestead in Florida City. Then we have the East-West corridor that runs basically from the airport west along 836 out west past FIU and ideally past the turnpike. Then there's also a Kendall corridor. This would connect to the Metro Rail at the Dayland station and basically run west along Kendall Drive. So these corridors have been studied various times over the years. Procurements have been initiated, and like everything, there are economic cycles,
Mhm.
and the studies will be going. You'll have some type of level of political support for it, and then because of some economic forecast change we've said, "No, we can't afford this. Let's stop the study or let's study something else." And I think
Yeah.
that's the behavior we need to change. And if we kept going through those studies and we stayed on those procedures, then you can work with the community and identify the funding gap and how to pay for that. It's easier to say this project is ready to go.
If the plan and the
Vote
vision
on this
is there. Right.
today, and it's coming soon. And that was actually the motivation back in 2002.
Yeah.
Recently, a study for that North Corridor on 27th Avenue and the East-West Corridor had just been finished, and the community was asked, "Help us pay for this." And that's how the half penny was approved.
So, but what are we gonna do now in terms of like who's realistically, in your opinion, gonna make something like this happen? Get because there's a lot of steps that you also outlined, right?
Right.
So, which one of these lines do you think are realistic and happening next, or do they all happen at the same time, or how does it work?
The idea by creating the SMART plan is that you weren't gonna pick an order of priority. You were going to move these projects forward in parallel, and easier projects would get done first, and more complex projects take longer. But to keep them all moving forward, and so that's how the South Corridor was built. For a long time, you couldn't talk about anything before the North Corridor because that was promised in the 80s. So that this is how other cities do it. They
Mhm.
have a pro forma and they work the projects in parallel and you make as much progress as you can, and then you identify the funding needs as you can. And in other places, the projects get built in phases,
Mhm.
and you come and you do that next phase when you identify funding. And that's the model in DC and New York, everywhere. So and the other thing is no city on earth Nowhere do you have a one-seat ride. So it's okay to have different modes on different corridors and to have a well-designed transfer from one system to the other,
Sure.
because it's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
You've been working now at this for 25 plus years, right? Making it your life's work to sort of improve mass transit here. Are you optimistic that these projects are going to get done?
I'm optimistic that we're gonna make progress. We're growing up as a city, and people that are moving here from places where transit was planned, and I think they'll help dispel this myth
Hmm.
that people in Miami are never gonna use transit even if you build it.
Yeah.
That's a myth. For some reason, there's a lot of people repeating that misinformation.
Right.
So we need everyone to hear from people that know that's not true, people that are interested in having transit, because we can't even widen the roads we have if we wanted to.
Right.
We're out of space.
I mean, I almost fell off my chair when you said you could take the Metro rail to the Hard Rock because I was like, the amount of time you spend in traffic getting out of there when you go to a game or a match or anything, it's mind blowing that we've come so far in so many areas as a city as it evolved, but that's really one of the biggest holes that's remaining. And I think people really need to talk about it more and talk to their government officials to, enact this smart plan.
Yeah, and I think if we wanna compare to something, we can see a lot of tall buildings out of the window that are very new. For each one of those buildings, a massive water pipe, a massive sewer pipe, pump stations, all this infrastructure had to be put in to make sure you could service that building. It's not optional.
Right.
Should we have water service or not? No, it's
Right.
not optional. So I think the transportation conversation needs to be at that level as well. It's not optional. We need this type of infrastructure to support the development that's happening.
Right, and, I know people are starting to talk about it. I mean, I'm sure they've been talking about it for a while, but at least I've been more aware of it recently, and about in October, we were just talking about the conference that was put together by who was that, TPO?
The Transportation Planning Organization.
Okay, so the Transportation Planning Organization, it was a great, talk that you guys had, and it seemed like the room was all very sort of energetic and enthused about these concepts that we're talking about now. Have you seen any substantive progress or dialogue continuing as a result of that?
I think something that came into the room after that was the debate about property taxes.
Mhm.
So I think that has drawn everyone's attention, and how governments are gonna continue providing basic services if there is a massive overhaul of homestead property taxes. That would impact just the existing transit service, and it would definitely impact the ability to implement new transit
But you
service.
mean taxes in the sense of because I know there was talk about maybe taxes going away, property tax. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So you're saying if that does happen,
I
then
I think people have been more focused on that issue,
okay,
and that has kinda taken precedence over the transportation
transportation.
discussion.
But they're not sort of directly related in the sense that those taxes are paying for transport or it is?
It does.
It
Your
does.
your transit department, maybe a certain percentage
Mhm.
of the operations of the transit department are funded by fare collection and revenues.
Mhm.
The rest of it is some type of federal subsidy, and then a lot of your general revenue, what you pay in property taxes.
Sure. Okay, that makes sense.
And the half penny is supposed to go towards new projects.
Right. So in the next 5 years, Alice, what, I mean, I've been, sort of painting a negative or coming hard on this, but give me some good news. In the next 5 years, what's achievable? What can we sort of look for or pay attention to?
Well, I think if you look at the projects,
Mhm.
one that is very far along is that Northeast corridor and providing that commuter rail on the existing FEC Brightline tracks.
Mhm.
They've gotten through most of the NEPA process. They're going through the federal evaluation process. Now it's making sure there's a funding plan for that
Sure.
involves the state matching the local money, and then continuing with that federal application. The history of that railroad is that's where the city's were developed because originally they relied on the railroad for transportation and connectivity. In
Right.
a way, we're restoring what was done away with in the 60s.
Right. Right. Right.
So that's the most
So the Northeast
obvious one.
corridor is making progress.
Yes, yes, yes,
Okay.
yes.
To Hard Rock.
Correct. No.
Getting confused here.
No, no, no. The Northeast Corridor runs
Uh-huh.
from downtown Miami,
Okay.
and it goes on the FEC tracks. So that runs through, let's
Right.
say, North Miami. There's already a
That's the one
station.
alongside the Bright Line.
It is the Bright Line tracks.
It's the same track.
Yes.
Okay.
So Dade County would actually pay an access fee to run a commuter rail train on the Bright Line tracks.
Got it. Got it.
And so the Bright Line train stops in Miami, Aventura, Fort Lauderdale. This train
Would stop
would
at the
stop
that's the one you were saying was a
Miami
commuter.
and all the stops in between and Aventura. And Broward County is working on a similar plan to have stops
Interesting.
in Broward County, also in between the major Bright Lines.
Right. So yeah, the infrastructure is there. I see what you're saying. The idea is just adding in now more commuter stops to sort of fill in the gaps between the big stations.
Correct, correct.
Okay.
And if you think about that southbound traffic in the morning of
Mhm.
people coming into downtown, you could see people using that service instead.
Right.
And
Yeah.
again, if you plan density around those stations, high-rise
Mhm.
buildings, and you have like a circulator that takes people from the buildings to the station, they take
Right.
the station in. Now that's how other cities work.
And I imagine developers are probably behind and excited about this because if you're building along the tracks, right? That's where the developers come in. So what are they doing to sort of help or advocate for this?
So I think there are many, many different groups. You have Chamber of Commerce. These groups, I think, are kind of lobbying each in
Mhm.
in their distinct way at the local level, at the state level for the funding and for these projects to move forward. But I think there also has to be like the voice of the general public.
Sure.
And if we go back to 2015, 2016, transportation and congestion were probably the number one political topic
Mm.
that was being discussed as part of reelection campaigns, et cetera.
Sure.
And I think that's why you saw the SMART plan get created
Right.
and unanimous support for it. So I think it was created, the corridors, the individual corridors started to move forward.
Mhm.
And I think people in their day-to-day lives don't have time to track or monitor if things are still on track, no pun
Right.
intended. But I think we need that unity of the voices again
For sure.
to make sure things keep moving.
And you talked about the downtown to Miami Beach connection. So I want to talk about that for a minute. Is that because I also heard about the kind of the Metro Mover getting, is that the same thing? The Metro Mover getting extended to Miami Beach?
So there was a study for that corridor,
Mhm.
and then there was a procurement for that corridor. And then as part of that procurement, the technology that was proposed was building a monorail
Okay.
between Miami Beach and downtown, connecting to the people mover
Right.
around where the Miami Herald used to be. And in the negotiations of that, it coincided with COVID and supply chain disruptions, and prices started going up. So that procurement was terminated, I believe, in 2021 or 2022.
Okay.
And then that idea of how about just extending the people mover instead, they decided that instead of the cost of this, let's stop this. Let's pivot and let's go to this other technology. But again, that kind of forces having to start
More
the
studies.
study process again.
Bureaucracy.
Um, the elected officials that were involved in that previous effort have all moved on to other
Moved on.
things, term limits, etc.
Do people want it? Like the citizens? I mean, Miami Beach and downtown connect. I mean, I think it sounds cool, but is there general popular support for it?
So I think what's interesting about Miami Beach is they have a large influx of employees every day, namely the employees at the hotels. I had the experience in 2018, Hurricane Irma. All transit service was suspended. We had to clear the streets of debris. We had to restore power to traffic signals. And I got a call from the head of the Hotels Association. And the call was basically, hey, when are you going to resume transit service? the hotels in Miami Beach cannot reopen because the employees have no way of getting to work. It
There's a need,
obviously
yeah.
there's a lot of transit users. I remember seeing an article, someone that worked in a hotel in Miami Beach lived maybe in Miramar.
Mhm.
So let's try to
So,
imagine what
an hour
their
and a half
travel time
commute,
is
yeah, at least.
there and back.
Forget Miramar, I live in Coral Gables, my wife works on Miami Beach, she spends 2.5 hours a day going to and from work. I mean, just going back to what you said about the quality of life, if you were able to hop on there on Douglas Station, let's say, go to downtown and connect to the beach, I mean, it just it's again, it's when you think about it, it's really frustrating.
I've had people that have nothing to do with transportation, that have nothing to do with development, tell me, "Oh, Alice, no one will ever use transit in Miami." I'm like, well, wake up at 5 in the morning and go see everybody standing in line,
Yeah.
waiting to get in a station or on a bus, because that's the only way they have to get to work.
Yeah.
And it should be reliable. So I think there's the transit system we have that
Mhm.
we have budgeted for, and the county does the best they can. And then there's, I think, the transit system we would all like to have
Mhm.
that would be clean, safe, reliable, convenient enough for you to use it instead of your car.
Mhm.
So I think that has to be mapped out
Right.
and figure out how to deliver it in pieces.
And we talked about in the next 5 years, well, what take me a little further in the next 10 to 20, what's your vision? What is our best outcome? And what has to happen? And who needs to get fired? No, just kidding.
I think it's hearing from the community. We want this. We need this. We're gonna use it if you build it. I think making it known how attractive the properties along the metro rail have become, how people are fighting to get into those buildings. We need to make that information more available locally in Tallahassee, to know that this is a good investment,
Absolutely.
and we can't rely on the roads. So that's the only way we're gonna keep moving these projects forward.
For sure. And the only way I think that as a city will really get to that peak true global city status. I mean, when you look at New York, London, all over Asia, I mean, it's critical. I think that and education, the need for more schools here is the two biggest, holes left to fill,
Yeah,
shall we say.
yeah. And I just want to say, not everybody's going to use transit, but if you get 10% people use it, 20% people use it, those are cars you're getting off the road,
Mhm.
and you're in essence creating affordable housing because now people can connect to where they are, even if it's far away.
Absolutely.
So
Well, we've had a lot of good chat here. I know we're running out of time. Give me the final thought, that you want our listeners to take with them.
I think people need to find a way to have their voices be heard if they think this is important, because that's how projects get implemented. You know, the elected officials want to hear from the public. The public is very busy.
Yeah.
They're in their cars a lot. So people need to find a way, whether it's part of a group or an organization or.
Is there one that you recommend? Like, what can somebody listening here that's motivated? I mean, what would be the first step, let's say?
Well, you have the Chamber of Commerce.
Mhm.
The Chamber of Commerce has a transportation committee. The Chamber of Commerce talks to elected officials at the local level, state level, federal level. So them being able to say, look, we have feedback from 10,000 members, 50,000 members, from the business owners saying my employees need this. Um, I think that goes a long way.
Writing to the Chamber of Commerce. Perfect. That's a start. Do they have an Instagram? Because I'm sure some of these listeners can
Sure,
use.
Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce, and also people, what if they live in a city,
Mhm.
letting their city commissioner, city mayor know, and also let your county commissioner, county
Yeah.
mayor know. This is important, and
So it starts with the dialogue, I guess, is what we're saying. Whether you go in person to the commission, you write
right.
them, you call them, and
Yeah.
and let them
We,
know.
the elected officials are dealing with a million issues.
Mhm.
Solid waste, what's going to happen with the property taxes? There's a number of things always that are very pressing issues. And this is long-term planning. And we're talking about voting on funding something today that may not get implemented for 5 or 10 years, so you have to get it on the front burner,
Right.
right?
Right. Right.
And there's a lot of things that are competing for attention.
Yep. Well, it's important, so we gotta get that attention. All right, Alice, I think we're gonna leave it there. Is there anything else you wanted to add or that I didn't touch on?
I think there's a lot of new technology coming. We see autonomous vehicles everywhere. One day, when all the vehicles are autonomous, they might all move together when the light turns green and help alleviate delays. But that's gonna take a long time. So I think we still need to push the transit options.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we'll put your information in the show notes so people can reach out if they're interested in connecting or learning more about what you do. I appreciate your insights and your passion and your hard work. And let's all, work together to do what we can to make some of this happen.
Fantastic. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. This was Alice Bravo on the Miami Real Estate Podcast. We invite you to like and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen. We're also on YouTube and on social. We'll be back soon with another episode. Until then, remember that here in Miami, the future is always bright. Take care, folks.